We're still looking at links and how we can send links to PHP pages and work with values. An issue has come up that we need to address, and that is, what if, for example, the name that we were trying to send here in our link for first page had an ampersand, and the name we are actually trying to send was Kevin Ampersand. Now, that's kind of a bogus example because obviously that's not my name, but we could, in fact, come up with some kind of a string that we needed to pass that had some kind of a character that would interfere with the URL. A question mark, an equal sign, an ampersand, quote marks, parentheses, those often tend to be problems. But there's a way that we can make sure in PHP that we take care of that, and that's using URL encoding. We're going to do some transformations using PHP to make sure that the value is safe before it's sent to the URL, and then we'll be able to pull it down successfully. So let's go ahead and just try this first example and see what happens. If I do a save, and I have Kevin and ID equals 42, and I go back to my browser, and I just go back to the first page and reload that, and then I hit second page, you'll see that the second ampersand was actually stripped out, and my name just became Kevin. It just ignored that second ampersand. If it had been important for some reason, we would have lost it. If we look up here, we'll see that it was in the URL string, but it did not pull it down successfully. So what we need to do is encode that value before it gets there. And PHP has something called URL encode that lets us do that. So let's go ahead and put in some PHP right here. We can put PHP right in place, and we're going to tell it to echo back something. Echo, and we're going to tell it to URL encode, all run together, the string Kevin and. There we are. And then I'll put my semicolon, and I'll end my PHP. And then it'll keep going with the regular HTML after that. So I can just drop PHP right in the middle of my HTML. I need to make sure that I echo it so that it comes back. If I just URL encode it, it'll URL encode it and throw it away. So I need to echo it back. Don't let the fact that it's broken up on 2 lines fool you. I could just as easily put a return there so that we can see it that way. That'll do the exact same thing. So now if we try it, and I do save, I haven't made any changes to second page at all. I'm just going to go back and reload it. And now when I click on it, I get the ampersand comes through. And if we look at the URL, we'll see why, and it's because it converted the ampersand to %26, and that is its encoding. And what happens with URL encode is that alphanumeric minus and underscore pass through completely unchanged. Spaces, if you had Kevin space Skoglund, would have a plus sign in place of the space. So it would be Kevin plus Skoglund would be the name I'd be sending. Everything else that's not alphanumeric minus underscore space is replaced by a % and the 2-digit hex code for it. Now, you don't need to learn those hex codes or learn what they mean. Your browser is going to understand them. PHP is going to understand them. And we can, on the backside, tell it that we want it to URL decode the name as well. Now, in truth, PHP will do that decoding for us. And so we really don't need URL decode very often. And so we're not going to include it in our code because it's going to handle it appropriately. If you find that you're having problems, know that there is such a thing as URL decode that can help you out. But chances are, when it creates the super global get, it does the URL decoding for you. So it's already done, and by the time we grab it out of get, it's ready to go. A lot of servers are going to do URL encoding for you as well and handle it perfectly fine. For example, if I had instead of name, if I had put something just like Kevin space Skoglund in there, and then saved it. Let's try that. We'll go back to first page, and let's reload it. When I click it, it went ahead and brought Kevin Skoglund all the way over, and it did its own URL encoding with %20. Now, that's my version of Apache on my computer. Yours may not have done the same thing, and all servers will not handle it the same way. Therefore, it's going to be much safer and cross-server compatible if we go ahead and encode those values and make sure that anything that we send in that URL string is going to be encoded. Now, if I had encoded that instead, I'll just undo a couple steps here so I can get back to where I had all that PHP code, and I instead put Kevin space Skoglund in there. It still works just fine. Let's go back, reload it. And when I click on second page, this time it actually applied my URL encoding, which is a plus sign as a space instead of the %20, which is the default server's way of encoding it. So don't rely on your server to do it for you. You want to encode these values. Now, you're encoding them whenever you're using a get string. Remember, we're talking about URLs and links. When we start talking about posts in a minute, I'll remind you again, but posts do not need to be encoded or decoded. That automatically happens as part of HTML and the way browsers work. It's only these get strings when we have a URL or a link when we're going to need to do encoding. Now, there's another version of encoding that you should know about as well, and that is called raw URL encoding. And there's some special circumstances where we're going to want to use that. Let's just go ahead and see the difference between those two. We'll go ahead and just go to our second page here. There we are. And let's just skip a new line here, BR, and let's just try the two. So we've got PHP, and let's make a string. And let's say that our string is just equal to Kevin space Skoglund. We'll just work with a space for now. We can echo back the URL encode of string. And then we'll go ahead and echo a BR. And then we'll do the new one, which is raw URL encode. And it just simply has the word raw in front of it. And we'll see the difference between those two. So let's go back and let's load up our second page. We don't need to change anything. And it came back, and you'll see the difference. For example, the raw URL encode did the same thing that my server was doing by default. It changed the space into a %20, and the other one used it with a plus sign. And in fact, that's going to be the only difference between the two, between raw URL encoding and URL encoding. So you may be wondering now, when should you use each one? And the answer is, if you're generating a dynamic link, if we had been generating this whole thing as a dynamic link from the beginning of href to the end, we're going to want to apply raw URL encode to anything that comes before the question mark. So if we had been dynamically generating the name of the page we were going to retrieve, we would want to use raw URL encode on it. We want to use regular URL encode for everything that comes after the question mark. And that's just because of the way servers work and the format that they're going to want it in. We're going to need to have raw URL encoding for everything before it and regular URL encoding for everything after it. And if that didn't complicate the encoding situation enough, there's actually a third case that we need to consider when we're constructing these links.